I've got my colleague here, Megan Peterson, Senior Program Manager at the Alzheimer's Association representing Eastern Iowa. She's responsible for the programming and the support groups there. So if I can't answer the question, we've got backup and deep expertise to help us out. So I'm excited to share this content with you. And no, it's not just me. The content, the presentation has a lot of videos from experts that you'll hear from many voices here tonight. And I don't want to talk at you. I want this to be interactive. So if you've got questions, interrupt, pause, and let's work through it. And let's share what we know about this this disease and learn from each other. So just moving forward, real quickly, I want to just go over some of the learning objectives for today. I want to just make sure everybody's clear on the kind of the definition, the understanding of what Alzheimer's and dementia is. We use those terms interchangeably. There's slight nuance to them. Want to make sure that we understand how Alzheimer's really affects the brain. What are the physical changes, biological changes that are happening to individuals? Understand the risk factors for the disease, the stages of the disease, and then talk briefly about some of the treatments and the research and the resources that are available to everybody. So first we want to just kind of talk globally. What is the impact of the disease? And it is a global crisis, a disease there affecting people not just in the US but around the world. Worldwide, there are about 50 million people suffering from Alzheimer's right now. I'm going to just kind of have a little interactive part and ask you, within the United States, what do you think the number of Americans living with Alzheimer's is today? Is it 3 million, 6 million, 8 million, 11 million?
More than 6 million.
6 million? Woohoo, give that girl a prize. She got the answer correct. Okay, more than 6 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's. Pretty large numbers there. And when we think about those individuals, they're being cared for by somebody. And so how many Americans do you think are providing unpaid care for those 6 million Americans?
Over 11 million.
Over 11 million. All right, let's see if he's right. Ding, ding, ding. We've got 2 correct answers. You guys are on a roll. Over 11 million caregivers who are unpaid caring for people with Alzheimer's. And if you're one of those caregivers, my compliments and pat yourself on the back. It's not an easy job. It's hard to do. And I encourage you, accept help. When your neighbors ask, for help, they say, what can you do? Tell them specifically, hey, I need my lawn mowed. Or when next time you're at Hy-Vee, this is what I need. And if you're offering help, try to be specific, because it's hard for anybody, to accept help. And so ask them specifically, or just say, hey, I'm going to bring chili over tomorrow night, and help out that way. We really need to stick together and help our community. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. All right, so here's a quick video. It's going to kind of bring all that together for us. Alzheimer's? Yes, memory, you are. Thank you for joining, and we are just getting started. You haven't missed a thing.
There's not a lot of parking.
It's tough. It's tough. Thank you for coming and persevering through all that. Some pretty startling numbers there. We talked about the number of people affected worldwide with Alzheimer's, 55 million, 6 million in the United States, but these data here telling you about the discrimination by race, ethnicity, the impact that COVID had on speeding up some of the deaths associated with Alzheimer's, and just the dollar amount, the staggering dollar amount, the cost of Alzheimer's. So lots of opportunity there, lots of need for all of us to get involved and help out. So we're going to give you another quiz here real quick. We are talking about risk factors here for Alzheimer's. And so first question, true or false? Do you think Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process? How many people say true? Nobody in the room says true. Okay, then I'm going to click false, and you guys are right. It's a brain disease that causes problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. It's not a normal part of that aging process. Aging is a risk factor for Alzheimer's, but it's not a normal part of aging. Another question for you. Can people younger than 65 get Alzheimer's? True. Yep, absolutely right. Not as many as people over 65, but it is possible for those of us younger than 65 to get Alzheimer's. All right, so we're going to hear from another expert here about...
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain, or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual. But there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
Okay, so dementia, the broad umbrella term with 4 subcategories under it, different types of dementia, Alzheimer's being that largest category there. So just a quick vignette here. Questions on that? Everybody's good? A quick vignette on why it's important to understand of those 4 types of dementia, what you may have.
Certainly having the diagnosis of Lewy body was helpful in our planning because we began to understand where this was coming from in the brain, where otherwise we would not have known. Like we knew something was happening, but what was it? To give it a label actually helped, although it was a big umbrella. It explains some of the characteristics and symptoms that we were experiencing and seeing.
So just the clarity, I think, of understanding the why and the where from, but I think it also helps with the kind of recognition. You cannot ignore the disease, and it really helps you to get your whole family on board and taking active steps to make sure that your loved one is going to be safe and that we are planning, and then the loved one obviously needing to know can be a part of that decision making as well. So good reasons there to really seek clarity and understanding of what's happening. So just a quick recap. Dementia umbrella term, Alzheimer's, vascular, Lewy body, frontal temporal, all different types of dementia. It's a progressive brain disease. It's not a normal part of the aging process. So let's talk about what happens to your brain with Alzheimer's. It is a disease and your brain changes. We're going to hear from some experts going to tell us about how those nerve cells die in the brain.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
So the brain changes for this disease, right? So your nerve cells are dying, the brain shrinks, it becomes lighter. There's going to be a little more space between some of those switchbacks, in the brain there. And, in the introduction, my rush to get started, I didn't tell you much about myself, but my mom had Alzheimer's, and so I walked that journey with her, and my family walked that journey with her. My daughter is a senior at City High and is looking at colleges, and this makes me think she was just up at Cornell College a couple weeks ago visiting some classes. She was in a biology class, and they were doing some labs, and so she was going from group to group, kind of understanding what's happening. But a professor came in from across the way and said, we just dissected some brains, a couple of brains. Is anybody interested? Put your gloves on, come over. So everybody went over, and she came back just excited. Oh my gosh, Mom, I held a human brain. One was healthy and one was not. And when the college gets the cadavers, they don't know the cause of death. But in just looking at the brain that was not healthy, they, hypothesized that it was an Alzheimer's, and just a senior in high school could recognize the changes that happen. It doesn't take a real expert. It really is that visible, the impact of the disease. So that kind of just a little personal story there. So risk factors. Let's talk about those risk factors here. And again, we're going to get you participating. Quick quiz for you. We've got on the screen 3 risk factors for Alzheimer's. My question to you is, which one do you think is the greatest risk factor? Is that age, family, or genetics? Well, we've got a hand up already. Go, go, go.
Age.
Age, absolutely right. That's it. And what makes me sad looking at all this is there's not a lot there I can control, darn it, right? We're all going to age. I know my mom had Alzheimer's, and my genes are my genes. So we got to work on the lifestyle things that we can control. But I think we've hit this point pretty hard already. It's not Alzheimer's isn't a normal part of the aging process. Once you hit 65, your risk increases and, shockingly, doubles every 5 years after that. And then this stat here saying that, 1 in 3 folks over the age of 85 are living with Alzheimer's. So we've got some experts here that are going to kind of elaborate a little bit further on that family history and genetics.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are 2 categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
And here, just some more data showing that race and gender do play a part in that risk as well, with Hispanics 1.5 times is more likely to get Alzheimer's than white Americans, and African Americans twice as likely to develop it. And then, I think majority women in the room here, we are more likely to contract Alzheimer's, and maybe it's because we live longer, right? Goes into that. And I think that ties back to some of the discrimination data points we saw early on. questions on those risk factors? Any comments? Okay. So now we know about the scope of the disease. We know about kind of the risk factors for it and what happens to the brain. Let's talk about the continuum, the stages of the disease itself. So we've got some beautiful vignettes here of people sharing their experience living with the disease. I'm just going to let them speak for themselves.
It's a different kind of forgetting. It really, really is. It's not just forgetting where I put my car keys. It's much deeper than that. And for example, I cannot read a book. I used to be a voracious reader because by the time I turn a page, I have forgotten what I had read. And if you're reading a novel, you have to know what transpired before in order for you to continue to read on. And so I can't read a novel, so I've even stopped trying.
Yeah. I like to read to my mom, and I would get kind of short stories. Chicken Soup for the Soul was one that I would read a lot to her. It was just a couple paragraphs and kind of keep moving forward.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. You know, I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, you know, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
Tough.
I'm like an overachiever. And when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and you just changed it last week and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
Frustrations of an overachiever.
I think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive, and I'm finding that I'm forgetting more. And they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor's, and so that becomes a little disconcerting at times to see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
I think another great reason for that diagnosis, understanding that diagnosis, that you know how you're going to live each day going forward, and what if this is something you could cure, right? So you want to understand it. But go ahead.
I was wondering if you can get dementia from like hitting your head, or is it just something that comes into your brain?
I don't know, Megan, I'm going to let you take a stab at that.
Yeah, so having brain trauma or hitting your head can increase your risk of having the disease. So there's research happening now on lifestyle factors, one of them being if someone has brain injuries and yes.
We forgot all about it.
Sorry, start all over.
That's okay. Okay, yes, so hitting your head is one of the risk factors of developing the disease, and there's more research happening now to find out what that means, how individuals are impacted. So we encourage people to wear a helmet if they are riding a bicycle or a motorcycle or in a situation that their head needs to be protected, and just to take precautions each day. Yeah, great question.
Yeah, I think Megan started talking about some of those lifestyle factors, and we'll hear a vignette a little bit further on. But I think that in the nutshell, what they're talking about is eating healthy, exercise, but treating your whole body. Every issue you may have, or that's cardiovascular or a concussion, but taking everything seriously, because that cumulative effect, is going to kind of trigger some other things potentially. And you're an integrated system, and we can't treat just one symptom or one part of you. So now we're going to talk about the continuum of the disease. You don't wake up, suddenly with lack of memory and some of the issues that we just heard about. It's a process, and it happens over a period of time. And unfortunately, everybody's experience is different, and we can't say, that you're going to be in phase 1 for 6 months, and phase 2 for 2 years, and phase 3 a different period of time. It's unfortunately not that descriptive, and everybody's different. So the disease does start at that asymptomatic stage, I think a term we're all familiar with from the last 3 years here, where you don't have any outward symptoms of the disease. It's just all biological. Your brain is starting to change. Those nerve cells are dying, and the brain is atrophying a little bit. And then you'll get to the mild cognitive impairment, that gold section there, the early stage, where you've got some cognitive loss, but it's not impacting your daily activities or life. And then you get into that dementia due to Alzheimer's, and that is subdivided into 3 categories. You'll see there mild, moderate, and severe. And in the mild, the symptoms are impacting some daily activities. In the moderate, many daily activities. And in the severe, most daily activities. And so it is a continuum. I think it's helpful to understand kind of the big picture. So if you're a person with Alzheimer's or a caregiver, you have some sense where you're at and where you're going, that you can just be forewarned and forearmed, prepared and thoughtful to what you want to happen in the coming time. And it was frustrating to me and my family not knowing exactly when I was going to pass the gate into the next session, because I don't know, we're wired that way, I think, to want to know all of the answers. I can tell you just, from my own personal experience, I don't know when my mom was asymptomatic. She had a lifestyle where she really loved her bread and her pop and wasn't excited about exercising. And so she didn't have that healthy lifestyle that they're really suggesting that we have. When we got to that, what I look back now, that mild cognitive impairment stage, I remember vividly being, in Sand Road at the softball field, and, Mom had her iPhone, because all the kids had an iPhone and she needed an iPhone, and that map app. She could not wrap her head around how to use the map, and I would have to, explain it, and, just kind of set it for her. So it wasn't impacting her, daily functioning. It was just a tool that she wasn't able to use. And then we got into the dementia stage, and, my mom was really anxious and suspicious. Really, I would get phone calls that, my sister got kidnapped and there's a $10,000 ransom, and just, if I said, no, Mom, Stacy's fine, I just talked to her, she would get really angry at me that, no, this is what's happening. And, when we would kind of walk through and talk through the whole story. So those were some of the behaviors she exhibited on those stages and how we dealt with them. I would coach my kids when they would go visit her that, it's time the girls would do little mani-pedis with her, rub lotion in her hands and in her feet and paint her nails and kind of pamper her a little bit. And the boys would work puzzles and, do some coloring with her. And, I would just say, hey, all those things Grandma did with you when you were little, it's time for you to do with her, and who doesn't like a new pack of crayons and a cool coloring book. So that's some of the stuff that we did, and we would go through picture albums. That was kind of fun, and work through memories like that. Easier for my kids who were here and saw my mom on a weekly basis. My nieces and nephews who are out of state and saw mom a couple times a year was a little tougher for them because it was, I think, jarring. I will tell you that the Alzheimer's Association has a lot of support groups and different tools. That I would go to a support group that met at the Solon Library on a monthly basis and just meet with some other caregivers and brainstorm with them, what are strategies that were working, particularly around the holidays when I knew I had a big crowd coming in, how do I minimize the sensation overload here and make this comfortable for everybody. So working with other people who have a little different experience and perspective was helpful to me as we worked through those stages. Yeah, go ahead. Wait a minute, we need the mic.
Okay. If you have like a family member with dementia and they like tell you something or like ask you a question and then you tell them the answer and they won't accept it, do you just let it go or do you still try to correct them again?
Yeah. Arguing and trying to get them to accept the correct answer just makes everybody frustrated, I think. And so, depending what it is, like, oh, you're right, or well, sometimes that's right, and just finding that middle ground to keep everybody satisfied. We don't want to get in a situation where there's a safety issue, right? And if safety is a concern, then you can take a little bit of a different stance. But if you're playing boggle, we would bend the rules and say, yeah, Mom, you can have 1-letter and 2-letter words. And so that's kind of how we did it. Does that help? Good. Great question. Anybody else? Questions? All right. So again, just a real quick recap of those stages, those broad stages, kind of that asymptomatic, mild cognitive impairment, that acronym MCI, and then the dementia stages kind of further broken down, mild, moderate, and severe, and just that everybody's unique and can experience a little bit differently. And when you do encounter some of those behaviors, because everybody's unique, I think, stepping back and evaluating, okay, what could have triggered that behavior? How could I have reacted differently? And just kind of decompressing or kind of doing a postmortem on that interaction and saying, okay, next time I'm going to try it this way, and just try to come up with, okay, what is the right answer, the right way to handle each situation? I always found that a little bit helpful as well. Okay, treatments. We've got some good stuff here. So things are accelerating, right? So the disease was discovered in 1906. It took us 90 years to get the first drug to treat some of those symptoms, but lots happened in the last 30, so that's exciting. So from 96 to 03, we had drugs that are introduced that really treated the symptoms and not the underlying biology of the disease. Some good, progress there, 96, 2000, 01, 03, then a little bit of a lag, almost 10 years to 14, the next one came. But this is the, so 14 was another one treating the symptoms there, and then 21, the Aduhelm that had the FDA fast-tracked for approval because it did treat some of those underlying biology, the plaques and the tangles that we heard about a little bit earlier. And I think there's another one that they're looking for fast-track approval this year as well. So we're kind of on a rush again, and so we heard one of our vignettes, the folks saying that they were hopeful that there was some solution, and I think now that we understand that progression, that the disease can start 10 years before you even see symptoms, then that really gives some momentum to finding earlier treatments and earlier identification. I'm hopeful, just kind of pure numbers, right? 55 million people worldwide, that's incentive for our drug companies to really find a solution there. Just, if you're unfamiliar with any of those drugs that are out there and you want to explore them further, I think that's a good conversation for your caregiver. Everybody's, has, again, we're trying to treat your whole system, and so really understanding how things interact with other things you might be trying to treat at the same time is something for you and your medical provider, and not something Megan and I can talk to right now. I will tell you that I tried several of those things with my mom. Those names are familiar. Questions on treatments? Lots of folks working on that. Okay, and I thought it was interesting too, we'll go back a slide, Megan shared before you guys all got here that the Alzheimer's Association really was developed in the 80s. And so you can see the power of this group coming in right here to really get some momentum going. And a lot of their mission is really, the vision is a world without Alzheimer's and dementia. And to achieve that, they're really trying to promote the research and the development and the detection and the caregiving. So some impact of the association right there. Okay, so a little bit about the research. And again, some vignettes, some great videos.
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease as a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
So trying to intervene earlier, as early as possible, and not just treat symptoms.
Growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive
I can
decline
pause
by
her.
adopting.
There you go.
So if they,
yeah, it's just not super loud.
so when they say early intervention, is it something that shows up in the blood, my husband has frontotemporal dementia, and I have 3 daughters, and I have, it's been in the family. His sister has it, and it's, at the latter stages. So when you say early intervention or investigating, is there a gene? Is there something, because I just kind of skipped over that. I didn't know what that means.
Yeah. Megan, yeah.
So you can certainly, there is genetic testing that can be done, but back to the risk factors where it talks about genetics, the 2 types of genes are risk genes and deterministic genes. For Alzheimer's, I don't know the exact numbers for frontotemporal, but it's very small. About 1% of individuals with Alzheimer's have that deterministic gene. But that's certainly something we know families that have done a test to see if that is something that's happening for them. Otherwise, early intervention is just paying attention to when those you might be noticing changes, talking to your provider about family history, so that if you start to notice any of the changes, in judgment or perception of behavior, as early as possible, talking to providers about possible interventions or a plan for the future.
Great question, thank you. So I think that's a nice segue into lifestyle factors. Let's see if we can get her to come back. There she is.
Growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive decline by adopting key lifestyle habits. More and more research shows that factors like exercise, nutrition, and aggressive management of cardiovascular risk factors may impact our ability to slow cognitive decline as we age. And through current studies, we're exploring how certain lifestyle factors may even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
All right, so all the things your mom told you: eat your vegetables, exercise, get good sleep.
A lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day, and I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
You know what path not to go down with that failure, right? I love her optimism there.
It's nice to see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
Big benefit of the Alzheimer's Association, really marshaling those resources and keeping the focus and priority. All right.
Participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
You might hear the phrase negative trial, which means it didn't hit the endpoint. It didn't result in an FDA-approved treatment for the disease. But I think the only negative trial is one that doesn't provide us with valuable information. If the trial is well designed and is a good scientific experiment, we can get extremely valuable data that can help plan the next trial and make it even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even prevention.
All right. So Alzheimer's has a great tool here, Trial Match.
By participating in clinical research, you can move us toward methods of treatment and prevention for all those affected by this devastating disease. Alzheimer's Association Trial Match is a free clinical studies matching service for those with dementia, caregivers, and healthy volunteers. To start, simply create a confidential user profile and receive a list of studies that may be a match for you. Don't just hope for a cure, help us find one.
So opportunity for everybody to participate in these trials, whether you have dementia or you're a caregiver, you know, you're not afflicted by the disease. And I think importantly, we're looking for these trials to be broadly representative by all races and genders there. We need a treatment that's going to treat everybody. So jump on their website, do that profile, see if there's something locally that you might be able to participate in. If you have the interest. Go ahead, Megan.
And I will add that there are clinical studies that are happening here at the university too. So if that is something that you're interested in going to Trial Match, that'll help pair you to some of those studies.
Awesome. We're lucky to live with the medical community that we have here in town, for sure. So just a quick recap on the research. We're making some progress. There's real cause for optimism in the last few years. We need everybody to participate here in finding that cure through the trials, both those with and without dementia. Lots of research across the country and across the globe. So alz.org/trialmatch. Okay, and then put a, another plug in here for the great work that the Alzheimer's Association is doing, and I've shared a little bit along the way, but it's a nationwide organization, really in all communities to help help all of us out here. So I talked briefly about the mission, really to support research, to support early identification, and maximizing quality of care and support, to really help them achieve that mission of a world without Alzheimer's and dementia. If you haven't been on the website, chock full of great information there. If you're not prone to use the website, they've got a 24/7 hotline staffed with, master's level clinicians that really qualified to answer questions or just listen if you need a breather. Take advantage of that. Just that nationwide community access. Megan's here, can tell you a little bit more of what's happening in eastern Iowa. But lots of great stuff there. And then, of course, other ways you can participate. You can volunteer in a lot of the great stuff that's happening. Locally, we have the walk. I think every September, the walk to end Alzheimer's happens in City Park, the ones I've participated in. Always a nice event. Advocacy, if you want to talk to your congresspeople at the state or federal level, talk about the importance and the benefits to their constituency of investing in Alzheimer's research. We talked about the trial match, the longest day, another fundraising activity. I've never participated in that one. Can you share a little bit, Megan, about what that is?
Sure. So the longest day is fundraising that happens on the summer solstice, and it's really individualized. So there's no event that you'll come to, but it's more thinking of what does your family enjoy. So if the individual that you're honoring loved to bake, maybe it's all coming together and having a bake sale or just baking together with one another. Or if they really liked playing games, maybe you have a euchre tournament or a bridge tournament to come together. Or maybe they like to cycle and you go cycling, or you do yoga for the day. It can really be anything, but just an opportunity to honor those who are impacted by Alzheimer's and other dementia, and their caregivers, and to highlight that on the longest day of the year, every day might be the longest day to an individual with dementia and their care partners.
Excellent. Thank you. That's the content that we have prepared for you. Any questions or comments or stories anybody wants to share? Well, thank you all for coming. Oh, yes.
So you mentioned about strategies for the holidays. Can you share if there were, I know you said everyone's different, but can you share if there were strategies that you found helpful in managing that?
So in my family, tradition was Thanksgiving, everybody came to my house, and, my brother's in Chicago, my sister's in Texas, and they would all stay with me, and it's kind of chaos, right? You got 7 kids, and there's a lot of loud, noisy, rowdy stuff. And so what I tried to do, Mom was living in the Solon Retirement Center, in the memory care there, and so we would go in small groups to see her and bring her to the house for shorter periods of time. So I tried to manage just that stimulation, was one of the things I did. And then she loved to prepare, memories of, the butter melting and the stuffing cooking. And so I wanted her to be a part of that. And so we sat her at the table and, gave her a pile of potatoes, and, she was peeling potatoes, and engaged that way, but really kind of kept a few people in the kitchen at that time so that she could enjoy it. So those were some of the strategies we did, tried to keep the tradition but adjust it a little bit there. And so she knew that we were all together, and I think that was helpful and was there for the good parts of it. So I don't know if anybody has any other strategies. I have 1,000. Well, do share. We want to learn from you.
I mean, what do I say? It's been progressing. I can see kind of when it started. His older sister had it, so it was much earlier for her, and she declined much more rapidly. But for my husband now, he's sort of at that severe stage. And we've been in Iowa City now 2 weeks and 4 days, moving from Germany after 17 years. And we're not from Iowa. We just have a daughter that teaches at the university. And so this was the logical place to come. So most of what I do would be just what made sense to me as an educator, as a special ed teacher and stuff like that. When you mentioned, do you correct them and stuff like that, most of the time I let 90% of what he says go. You know, you can't do everything. Just like she said, if it's dangerous, you know, you have to put your foot down. But most of the time I can kind of redirect and say, well, tomorrow we can do that. Tomorrow night we'll go do that. Or no, everything's fine with that. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And every day is new, and some days are better than others. And I mean, he wasn't an unhealthy person. He wasn't an inactive person, but he did make some poor choices as far as drinking too much cola or you know, that kind of thing, but not sedentary at all. He was a clinical research, I mean, he was clinical counselor, brilliant person. But now he entertains himself, which is actually kind of a good idea. We got puzzles. Really, they're like for 2-year-olds plus, but he can spend, you know, an hour and a half putting together simple puzzles. Or I'll get another one was an I Spy, but just 2 pieces, not the whole page, or, you know, things like that. That if I can get him engaged in that, then it gives me 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour of not watching him. As far as medication, I know that frontotemporal, it really isn't. He was diagnosed by a German doctor, and he said there really isn't any medication. He does have some, but it doesn't necessarily, I mean, I can skip giving it to him, and it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference. But like I say, we've just been here a short time. And the move, we had a wedding on the 6th of September in Germany with my middle daughter. And so things have been definitely chaotic. And right now he's in a phase where he wants to see his family. And of course, you know, his mother died at 7, his father died in 89. And we've been together nearly 50 years. And hopefully that'll go back down. It kind of came up a few months ago where he was looking for his house and looking for his family, and then it went away. And now it's, you know, the last 3-4 days that's been really anxious for him. So I'm here to learn something or to plug into something or support groups or trials. I don't know if he's too advanced to have any. I know that there was something about dental studies with dementia patients, and I contacted him twice, and I haven't heard anything back. But he would be a good candidate for that because he has had problems with his teeth much of his life. And so I'm rambling now. But anyway, that's kind of where I am. And my daughters are taking care of him. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes tonight.
Thank you for sharing, and welcome to Iowa City.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
you're in
you.
a great community. We'll get you plugged in here. Yeah.
Is that group at the Solon Library still active, do you think?
I'm not sure. And there's one that meets at the Senior Center. I went to Solon because I live north on Highway 1. So the Senior Center group, I got to a couple times. Yeah.
That I know. Yeah. Yes. Sorry. our groups are slow to get back in person again, but I do have a list of some groups that I can share with you, and then we can exchange information too. So as more groups are added, I can always connect with you. Okay, good.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's great. No, and as far as clinical studies, if you connect on that trial match, it'll bring up the trials that are available and what criteria. You can put the criteria in to see if any of them match. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments, ways we can help each other here?
We have kids' puzzles available for checkout too in the children's room. If you're looking for more puzzles or manipulatives that are more at a simple level, check out the children's room. We have a huge selection of those. So. Yes, in the children's room. There's a whole bunch of toys. Yes. And you can keep them for 3 weeks. So if you're looking for new activities. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea too. Go to the thrift stores. Yeah. All right.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for coming. Megan and the website available ongoing after this. Thank you, Anne, and the library for hosting this for us. We appreciate getting the word out, and I trust that there's a lot of people online joining us here. So I think we did some good tonight. Thank you all.